Good afternoon. I'm Jim Turk, the director of the Center for Free Expression. I'd like to welcome you to today's panel. Across North America, both in the United States and Canada, we've been hearing increasing demands that books be banned from school libraries and from public libraries. And these demands are being pressed with increasing urgency and zeal. Those demanding censorship and removal of books are claiming to do it for the good of students. But the student voice in this controversy is rarely heard. Today's panel is an effort to change this, to hear from students for a time, not just from parents' rights groups and politicians trying to carry out their wishes. I'd like to begin today, though, with acknowledging that the land on which I am speaking to you today is the territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. And I'd also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Williams Treaties with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. I would also, before we begin, like to thank our co-sponsors for today's panel, the Canada School Libraries and PEN Canada. Thank you very much. We have a really interesting panel today, and I'd like to introduce them. The first is Micaiah Adjobi. Micaiah is a 17-year-old student at Sackville High School in Sackville, Nova Scotia. He's treasurer of his school's council, student council. He's an Oceanwise Youth to Sea ambassador, helping promote ocean literacy in his community. And he's an active environmentalist and recipient of the 2022 Halifax Regional Municipality Volunteer Award. Welcome, Micaiah.
Hi.
Our second panelist is Dáminí Awóyígà. Dáminí is a 16-year-old high school student. She's quite impressive. She's the founder of Dáminí Creatives and the Afro-Indigenous Book Club, a book club created to encourage young people to read books written by Black and Indigenous authors, and to share the realities and experience of Black and Indigenous Canadians. She's an activist spoken word poet and Halifax's Youth Poet Laureate. Welcome, Dáminí.
Thank you so much for having me.
Our pleasure. And the third panelist is Jayreece Whiley. Jayreece is a first-year university student at St. Mary's University. He was the 2023 Valedictorian for Charles P. Allen High School in Nova Scotia, winning the Sobey Leadership Award and the Charles P. Allen Staff Award, amongst other awards. And he's an aspiring African Nova Scotian spoken word artist and a proud member of the Black community of Upper Hammonds Plains. Welcome, Jayreece.
Thank you for having me.
We're grateful you could be with us. Our moderator for this panel is equally impressive. She is Elle Jones. Elle is an assistant professor of political and Canadian studies at Mount St. Vincent University. She's also a senior fellow of the Center for Free Expression and a poet. She was the 5th Poet Laureate of Halifax and a poet in residence at the University of Toronto Scarborough in 2021. She's also a journalist who's won 2 Atlantic Journalism Gold Awards. Welcome, Elle.
Thank you, Jim.
Now, today's panel is actually going to be a conversation amongst our panelists. And so that will go on for, first 45 minutes or so. And to the audience, when you're listening to it, I hope you'll have questions for the panelists. We really want students' voice to be heard for a change. It's been silenced in much of this discussion. And so in this version of Zoom, if you look down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A button. You just click on that and you can write out a question that you would like to ask. And I'd encourage you, if a question comes to mind while you're listening to their conversation, you just click on it, write the question at the time. You don't have to wait till we get to that part of this afternoon's program to put out your questions. And when Elle and the panel turn to the audience, they'll ask Ange Holmes, who's the coordinator of the center, to read out each question in turn, and then they'll deal with it and come back and deal with more questions. So please, audience, this is your chance to really help hear more of what you'd like to hear from students. I hope you'll ask lots of questions. That's all for me, so I'll see you all later. Good luck.
Thank you, Jim. Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much to the Centre for Free Expression, PEN Canada, and I forgot the name of the libraries, Canadian Libraries. Sorry. Thank you to you as well for sponsoring this event. This is very exciting to have young people gathered here today. And we thank you so much for being willing to share your thoughts. We are all in Mi'kma'ki, the unceded and unsurrendered territories of the Mi'kmaq people, governed by the Peace and Friendship Treaties of 1752. So welcome all of you. So this is just a conversation, and for everybody listening in the audience, we're just hoping that the conversation will go where it will. But I'm going to just open with a question. And Micaiah, I'm going to call on you, so I hope you don't feel bad about that. Could you just tell us a bit about what's been happening in your school with books?
For my school personally, when the book ban happened for The Hate You Give, for my grade specifically, it hasn't directly affected our grade, but I know it's hindered for some of the younger grades, what type of books that they're able to talk about like in school and the content that some of the students that are able to read. I was having a conversation with my English teacher, and he said like in the past, they have been able to use certain books and certain literature, but due to the recent book bans and the recent like conversations that are being brought up about in books, things have been changed. So
Jayreece, do you want to maybe talk about that as well? Have you experienced the same thing? I know that you've recently graduated, so could you tell us a bit about that experience of seeing books being changed in the high school system after you, as a Black student, have gone through the system and are now engaging in university education too?
Yeah, I can't really speak to it like in terms of like university per se, because it's kind of still my like, first semester. But yeah, when it comes to like high school and just like, going through the public education system, I think because like my sister, she's going through it as well, and she's currently in grade 11. So I just think like some of the books that I would have read, and especially like English African heritage, like courses such as that, I think that would have a big hindrance on like just even having courses that you can actually explore Black literature and different things of that manner. And I think there's actually like an absence of that already. So like kind of like putting book bannings and just taking books out of schools when there's already not enough Black literature within schools, I think that that can be very harmful, especially for the people like after me per se. So just like thinking of my sister, thinking about how like and my brother as well, like if he when he gets to grade 8, The Hate You Give probably won't be like taught in classroom, so you're kind of missing out on some discussions and some different aspects of the book that can really be discussed amongst the class, and it can really be used as a, I would say, as a learning experience. I think that would be missing from everybody's education kind of after the book ban in that sense.
And Dáminí, you've obviously created a book club specifically to encourage people to read Black and Indigenous books. Can you, and all of you can jump in here too, can you tell us a bit about The Hate You Give for those who haven't read this book? Can you talk to us a bit about what is in this book and why you think this book in particular has been so targeted?
Yeah, it's a really good book. It's about this girl Star who's navigating two worlds between Garden Heights and the greater world of the white community that she goes to school in. And it's about her experience when her friend Khalil gets shot on the way home from a party that they went to. And it's about that process after her friend is shot as a result of police brutality and how she deals with it and the choices she has to make in terms of whether she's going to speak up and support her community or stay quiet. So I think that book is really important for a lot of people to read, especially because of its background and the impact it can have on people when they read it. Because when I first read it, actually, I had a really strong reaction to it, and I didn't really expect that. And the second time I read it too, I had that same reaction. So it really showed me that if I can have that reaction, such a powerful reaction to a book like that, imagine the change that it could create in other people's lives, how they view Black people, Black communities, or when things happen as a result of these.
You're breaking up a little bit. We can hear you, but I don't know. There's a little in and out from you. So I don't know if maybe you want to try something with your audio. but all of you can tell me this too. So what reasoning were you given for this book being pulled from the classroom? And my understanding is it's not pulled from the library, but they don't want it to be on the classroom reading list. Is that correct? And what reasoning were each of you heard that, like, why aren't you supposed to read this book anymore? What's going on there? Okay, Micaiah, I'll start with you. You leaned in, so go ahead.
From what I know, the reason that I've been given is that due to the usage of some of the language in the books, such as the N-word, and things like that, the book has been pulled from shelves just so for teachers not to be able, or they shouldn't be in those like situations where they have to go into conversation with students about that, and that could also bring up different topics, and it could bring up different traumas to different students who may be sensitive to different types of things with like the N-word. So that's just like the main reason for that.
But Dáminí, you've worked a lot with youth doing youth. Do you find that that's the case, that young people can't hear controversial language or deal with tough issues? Or do you think that youth are very able to read about these issues, learn from them, discuss them together? What has been your experience working with young people reading difficult books?
I think definitely we're mature enough to handle it. And like even at schools, me and my friends were actually joking about this when the book was first banned, that like, have you heard a grade 8 like talk? Do you hear the things that they say and the amount of times that they swear? Maybe they shouldn't be swearing so young and things like that. But they do have vast vocabularies. They can think deeply about things and they can comprehend things. So it's mainly that it's about how people view the language and the information, because there's many other books in the library at school that have swear words, but they haven't been taken out, and other things that maybe shouldn't be in books. But you kind of have to see the good and the bad and take the good.
And Jayreece, you mentioned that you haven't you don't read a lot of Black literature in school in the first place. So why do you think, and we also know in the States that this book is one of the most targeted books. It's been one of the books that's been most discussed around these bans. So I know Micaiah gave us some reasoning as well, but why do you think this book in particular and this kind of content, particularly when Black students already aren't seeing themselves in the curriculum, why do you think we're seeing this book targeted?
I think like part of it, like kind of to add on to what like Dáminí said, it kind of goes back to like some of the issues that it kind of has within the book. Like if we actually kind of dissect the book, we have like the issue of police brutality. We also have like the issue of like an issue regarding just the community overall, in a sense, where like the resources, like even their like the high school wasn't, like, if you kind of like read back and kind of look in the book, it wasn't really seen in the greatest light. And we can kind of trace this back to different like things that are currently going on, like per se in the United States, where like, you know, Black communities, like the education system is kind of failing them in like certain cities within the United States. So I feel like specifically in the United States, it would be targeted because they don't want people to really know about it. They don't really want people to really like know this information, because then there's going to be kind of maybe an uproar in a sense. I also feel that just when it comes to the conversation, I don't think a lot of teachers are given the training to actually be able to have these conversations and to actually be able to mediate these conversations and that do it in a safe and effective manner where everybody doesn't feel, or where people don't feel a certain way about it, where it's just like an open conversation such as we're having right now, where people are comfortable and people can actually express themselves and we can actually all come away from it learning something. So I think it also goes back to like maybe the choice of, instead of educating teachers on this, maybe just saying, okay, it's probably easier just to take the book away than to actually put in the work. So then teachers can actually educate students effectively on these problems that are definitely need to be touched on and definitely need to be learned by youth as they become adults in the coming years. So
I really agree with that because, like, our teacher, the first teacher that actually really talked about this issue happening, was my English IB teacher in grade 10. And he was a really good teacher, and he really made sure to give disclaimers and give warnings in the case that he had 2 Black students in his class, and that also it could have an impact on us and others too. So he did a really good job of being aware of those things and explaining why the N-word should not be used in the class by others who are not Black. And he really approached it in a way that was tactful and very careful. And I think that it's true that a lot of times teachers don't take that time to make those disclaimers or to say those things, and that can really cause harm.
Micaiah, you've been nodding along with a lot of these comments too, so go ahead and jump in. What did you want to add?
Yeah, just adding on to Dáminí, the way that teachers are just able to put in that extra time and kind of go deeper and connect with the students and to be able to have these conversations in these classes, because especially with a book like The Hate You Give, by leaving it to kind of a more open discussion and getting more personal with the students, it's more likely for students to be able to, you know, speak up and not kind of, I don't know, hide back behind what they want to say. Because I know for the most of the time, anytime we do like a book talk in class or something like that, or conversation, when it's not like that open with like that understanding from the teacher, between the teachers and the students, there's not like a lot of reception throughout all the students. So like the more that the teacher's just aware of how the students are feeling and how like the conversation could be flowing like through this open conversation, the more successful that will get everybody to, you know, give a free expression.
Have you experienced, so has it been your experience as students that these discussions haven't been appropriate in class? Because it seems that part of the reasoning here, there's conservative book bans where they're just going, oh, you know, there's sex scenes, you know, like let's take out anything, or there's gay people. And this hasn't been that, but it seems to be kind of phrased as like we're protecting Black students by not having this material. So I was wondering, have you experienced discussions that haven't been appropriate? Have you found that the class has responded to these discussions? Have you, I mean, Dáminí, you talked a bit about this, that you have had really good discussions in class. So I'm wondering kind of where did this idea come from that Black students in particular need to be treated carefully around reading this literature? Has there been complaints? Have you experienced things in the school? And I guess this is a long question, but is it the books that are causing racism in school, or are you having other experiences of racism that have nothing to do with what you're reading in the classroom? Dáminí, might as well jump in because you know me, so you can probably handle that 12-part question.
Yeah, definitely the Center for Education and Learning released a little pamphlet that they wanted teachers to use to choose books for their class. And they said that they should not use resources that portray Black individuals and groups as less intelligent or incapable when they use dialects or speech patterns that differ from standard language. So I found that really confusing because using like in or vernacular is part of our culture. So saying that if things like that are in a book, then it's bad or it's not considered standard language or it makes us look less intelligent is a really inappropriate ideology to me. And I think that a lot of these books actually can reflect a lot of people in positive ways in terms of being able to see yourself in characters. Because in Star, even, I see myself as a girl, as a 16-year-old girl, going to school, having 2 different realities of my community, my Black community, in my school that's predominantly white. So I think people need to really see what the main issue is, which is the censorship of us as youth, as teens, and the things that we want to read and to say and express. And in my school, I'm fairly outspoken, but in the past few years, there has been some experiences of racism that I've had, and even microaggressions that still happen on a daily basis. So I really think it's it's not the books that should be taken out. It's that people need to be educated, because we have to live our lives as Black people every day. We can't avoid the realities of our lives.
Jayreece, I saw you nodding. So, if you move your head,
Can
back to you. So go ahead.
you repeat the question?
It
Kind
was
of
just a kind of a long question. I was just kind of asking you, have these books actually caused like racist discussions, or are people targeting the books rather than dealing with racism that's actually happening in the schools in a broader way? That's a better way to ask the question. There you go. Does that make more sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I kind of like think about it, like I kind of, because I remember when you first originally asked it as well, you kind of said like, do you have any experiences kind of like negative? And I can kind of like think back to like grade 9 in a sense, where a teacher, she had to act like they have to have like a permission slip before like they play like a video with like the N-word or something, like if like anything of that manner. And the teacher actually just like the day of, a lot of the students didn't get the slip signed, especially like the Black students, and she just made us watch it anyway. So it was just like kind of going back to that. I think this whole like thing when it comes to like Black students not feeling just kind of feeling some type of way when it comes to like the use of the N-word in class and stuff of like that manner. I think it comes back to the way the students they use the N-word and kind of like, think of Black people when the N-word's used. Because I know when the video was being played or the movie was being played, that there was just looks. There's like two, I think it was just me and another person, and they just looked at both of us. So with that with that happening, it just makes you kind of traumatized in a sense, because you're just like, well, I'm not that, if I look at the meaning of the word, I'm not that. So it's just like, I think it also comes back to like, we just need to educate. And I feel like when we remove books and we remove things, it doesn't really leave room for educating. And it really kind of puts us back in a sense, because because if they're looking at us when they hear it on TV or they hear it on a certain thing and they're thinking about Black people, it kind of it leads to a bigger problem of how they perceive Black people, and it's in an incorrect manner. So I think there's probably no better place to really teach it than really in school, to kind of go against the grain in that sense.
Okay, I don't know if you have anything that you want to add. You don't have to answer the question. Maybe coming out of this discussion, if there's anything else that you wanted to say.
Yeah, nothing too much. Just I just know my like personal experience. Anytime there's like sort of a book or some sort of media centered around like the idea of, racism and prejudice and stuff, it's just like most of the students just in schools are just kind of not as educated on these sorts of topics. So it always like makes for like kind of a kind of I wouldn't say awkward, I don't know, awkward situation like in the classes and stuff. And as for me, I go to like a predominantly white school, so anytime stuff like that happens, like everybody's always turning, looking at me, and it just makes for a funny situation. But it just always comes back to people just need to be educated, and they just need to learn and know more so they're able to have these conversations. And yeah.
So Dáminí, you mentioned that you were given there was a chart.
Yeah.
That they said so what's the idea that things that are controversial then wouldn't be in the classroom? Like what else would qualify in this chart? I guess I'm curious about that. You mentioned that the bluest eye might also have been targeted by this. So have there been others along with the hate you give that?
I haven't really heard about any other ones, except I know the bluest eye was taken out for its content and words. But I just really think it's important to keep these books, because a lot of the discussions that can be created as a result of reading these books is really, it's more positive than not having them at all. Because a lot of the discussions we had in that class really opened people's eyes up, because a lot of people in our class didn't understand what it was like to to know that police sometimes aren't always going to do the right thing. Because some people are like, oh, like when these things happen, why don't you just call the police? And our whole class was just like shook because that doesn't make sense. You're being oppressed by the police. How do you then call the police to help in the situation where you're being oppressed? So it really was important that we had that conversation because that day we changed somebody's worldview, hopefully. And hopefully when they go out into the world, they can therefore have an understanding.
And all three of you really are activists as well. So you're all in school, you're students, but all three of you are also active in your communities. So as also one, a lot of you have talked as you're talking about this book and how important the characterization of this book, the issues are in this book. So maybe just, I guess what kind of gets me is that you can't read a book about these issues, but the young people are leading us out in the streets in so many of these protests. So I don't know if any of you, or one by one, want to sort of talk about your also experiences of being young Black people in this world. You know, so many of you were doing things in 2020 in your schools. So just how you experience being young people using your voices, and especially using your voices as Black leaders and Black activists, and like why taking out a book isn't going to change those conditions, I guess. So I guess I'm giving you an opportunity to sort of tell me about your activist work as well. Micaiah, I get to start with you again. So
for me personally, I'd say whenever I'm doing, for example, like things at school, helping with student council as like part of the student council exec, I use that as an opportunity just to kind of be the voice for Black students in my school. Like I said before, the school is like a predominantly white school, so being able to be kind of the forefront and showing students that like look like me that they can be in positions of leadership and they can help lead others in the schools and community. It's just a great thing for students alike, and it really hits home for me because growing up in my community, I never really had that sort of leadership figure as like for students that were older than me. So just being able to lead the way for, you know, people coming after me, like my sister, my brother, and their friends and things like that, just hits home for me.
And Jayreece, as you as well, and both of you and Dáminí are also authors. So from that, and maybe you are, Micaiah, and we just didn't hear about it. So from the position also of writing, I'm wondering what message that sends to you as young speakers and writers. And Micaiah, you're obviously also somebody that's using your voice constantly, when you're also being given this message that speech is supposed to be treated so carefully in these ways. So how does that shape you as writers, and how do you push back on that? I mean, I've heard a lot of your work that is often challenging and taking on issues of race. So how do both of you, and Micaiah, you can also jump in here. What would you say to speak back to this idea that, you know, language for young people shouldn't be controversial or should only be a certain way or can't engage difficult topics? And Dáminí, I'll start with you.
Yeah, definitely. I find this sometimes when I'm writing poetry that I even censor myself. I'll be like, oh my God, this is too harsh. This is too much us versus them. This is too much of like attacking. So I'll have to find ways to reshape it, even though maybe that's not how I want to say it. Maybe that's not how it's coming out from my heart, but I do have to find a way to, I guess, tone it down, which isn't necessarily what we should be doing as teens, as youth. We should be allowed to say what we want, speak how we want, in a respectful way, of course. But I really do struggle with that sometimes in writing poetry, but I'm also trying to learn how to be okay with being vulnerable, being okay with saying what I need to say, in whatever way I have to say.
How about you, Jayreece?
Yeah, kind of like what Dáminí said in a sense. It's I struggle with that as well, kind of censoring myself, but I find it important to kind of catch myself in that and kind of go against that in a sense. So like even like an example of that would be kind of when I went to Charles P. Allen in like grade 10, and like the Black students, we were like in a closet. It was like a small room, and then it was really small. And you know, one of the first, like it was like I think the second month in, you know, I work with Cheetahs for Change, and I was like, we got to do better. Like, it looks like we're an afterthought, and it doesn't seem right to have. Well, it doesn't even seem right. It's just not right to have a bunch of Black students in a closet. It just does not sound right. It's not right. So, that's what I said, and it went throughout the whole school. It was played within all the classrooms. The principal heard it, and then like I think the following semester or even the next year, we got like a big room. We got a bigger room. So it's just like I look at certain like circumstances where I was forced to kind of speak up because I was like, you know, my aunts were in the same situation. I was like, if my aunts were in the same situation, I'm in the same situation. I can't let the people after me be in the same situation. So it's like I speak up or just never or keeps going unnoticed. And I think, yeah, just finding power in that and finding power in kind of like what happened and just finding like the urge to kind of like, yeah, speak against what's happening and speaking against what isn't right. I think that kind of trumps me censoring and that censoring myself, because I know that if I censor myself, it kind of the effectiveness of what I'm trying to say, it doesn't get across as well. So yeah, just have like Dáminí said, in a sense, having a vulnerability with everybody and just seeing just seeing a vision and seeing my purpose within a plan or whatever I'm trying to do. And just fighting against it, because it is a struggle being a poet, and it's just I could definitely speak to that. But yeah.
Micaiah, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
Me personally, I'm not a writer like that. But yeah, I don't know. When I do write, which is rare, I just find it's better for me to speak my full thoughts and kind of just break it down. Because when I kind of expand and not censor myself, so you could say, it just allows for me to say everything that I want to say and be able to get my point across without like losing anything like information sort of like that. So just being able to speak out and not having to constrict yourself, is just what I would say.
We have I'm going to give you about 2 more questions, and we're going to go to questions from the audience just so we know what we're doing. So the first question, I just wonder, what is it that, I mean, everything you said makes me think that that's exactly why I'm also scared of the youth voice, that, that it's so effective. So, what do you think it is that people fear when youth read and learn and organize in ways perhaps outside of how your schools and teachers imagine? So what is it that you all, imagine for yourselves? Like, what kind of books would you, ideally, if you were in control of the reading list and if you were teaching in the classroom and you were setting these things up, what kind of vision would you have? What do you think that the classroom should look like? What kind of books should we be reading and listening to? Dáminí, you nodded, so that means you get to go first. Haha.
Definitely, the Book of Negroes. We had it in our class in grade 9, and I was surprised to see it there because I thought people would think that like it wasn't appropriate for that age, but I was really happy to see it because a lot of people in my class were like, "Oh my God, what book is that? Let me see it." So they started reading it. Okay, this could possibly create change. And then when I got to high school, I looked around my English class. Luckily, we had a lot of books. We had The Hate You Give. We had The Book of Negroes. We had Our Mother's Gardens by Alice Walker. And I got to read that one, and I really liked it. But when I go to the library, those books aren't available. Or if I go to other classrooms, other English classrooms, none of those books are on display or shown. So it's a bit of a struggle when teachers who have passion to teach subjects such as racism, issues that happen with racism, or people's experiences that can be negative at times and positive. When those teachers choose to put those books in their classroom, they're enhancing the experiences and lives of kids. But when teachers don't do that, they're almost closing off the opportunities that kids have to learn. And I think in my ideal world, kids would have access to whatever books they want to read.
How about you, Micaiah?
For me, I just like to see more books in schools, more sort of focused around just more world issues, because I think one of the things that most kids need is just more like ideas around like the world and like what's going on in the world. And the way that, I don't know, I've been brought up in school is that there's not too many, there's more kind of like I wouldn't say narrow-minded thinking, but like everything's kind of like zoomed in, not really like zoomed out on everything. You know, most people I know just like know things around what's happening in like their just town, their province, like not too much things around like the country and like, you know, the world. So more things on uh just world issues and things like that would just be great for students to dig in and get on.
And how about you, Jayreece?
Yeah, I think yeah, like books that kind of speak to world issues is definitely like important because in a time like because like as you're kind of growing up and as you're going through the education system, like your reality is kind of being shaped. And you know, you're starting to perceive things and you're starting to grow, and you're starting to actually kind of see the world. And when you kind of grow up, the amount of learning that you do kind of it can kind of decrease, count on who you are. And if you're an active learner, so it's kind of I feel like it's very crucial to have books that can help like aid people in learning social issues, because if people don't learn about social issues and don't know about social issues, how do we solve social issues? Like I feel like if we're blind to it, we can never really solve anything. If we're blind to the problem, we can't find a solution to the problem in a sense. So just yeah, books that kind of showcase certain issues, and kind of like what Dáminí said, I feel like if a student wants to read a book and they feel like they can handle it and they feel like um they're mature enough and like yeah, just like that they should be able to read what they want, and like kind of because that can help them grow in a way that can help impact society and yeah, make society better.
You guys are actually lucky because I don't remember reading a Black book in high school. I can't remember the first time I was assigned a book by a Black author, but it would be like, I want to say my master's, like well into university, I think, before we read a book by Black people. So, I mean, it's interesting that we finally got these books on the curriculum and now people are trying to take them out, you know? And then, of course, like we read so many terrible things. Like I was reading like V.C. Andrews when I was like in elementary school. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, those who are listening, Flowers in the Attic, you'll remember. You boys won't know. Girls know what I'm talking about, of a certain age. Like we were just reading terrible books with like awful content. And the idea that, you know, now that we actually have like so many Black authors, we're still fighting to be published. And those of you who write know this, we're still fighting to get our voices out there, to be taken seriously as authors, to have our books distributed in the same way. And then to now meet with this idea that we can't handle those books and they need to be pulled back, I think is disappointing. So for the last question from me and last discussion before we go to the audience, and audience, please have some questions because you've seen these just amazing youth with so many things to say about not only reading and books and their importance, but the school system and how Black students are moving through that. So don't feel that you also just have to keep questions strictly on books. If I'm sure they can handle broader questions about, you know, their experiences in the school environment. So get those questions ready. But for my last question, for each of you, what would you say to students to encourage them about reading and what they should read? And what would you say to the people that are taking these books out of your classroom? So a message to students, and then a message to the people who are getting rid of your books. So I don't know who wants to go first. Okay, Jayreece, you're first.
I think yeah, a message to students would be yeah, just don't, like, it's unfortunate like the events that happen in the banning of books, but just don't let that kind of deter you from kind of getting the knowledge, because knowledge is power. So yeah, don't let that kind of hinder you in a sense. Like if you want to read a book, like there's different resources. It's not as good as if it was in school or you could like discuss with your peers. That's like a certain experience that can really help one like take in a book and grasp a book and going through it and dissecting a book. But yeah, just don't let that hinder your experience. Don't let that don't let what's happening kind of deter you from reading a book. To the people that kind of are banning the books, I would say there needs to be a kind of a change of like how they go about this. I feel if students were involved in the action to kind of take away these books, I could respect it more. But I don't really respect the fact that there was little or no student involvement in this. So I feel like if you're making decisions for students should be involved, because at the end of the day, you're impacting students. You're impacting students' lives. You're impacting what they're learning. You're impacting their minds in a certain way. So I feel like, yeah, just the involvement of students and just to really think about all of the negative things when it comes to like banning books. So I think, yeah, just think more carefully maybe, and just think more in depth and just have students involved. And yeah.
Thank you. Micaiah, how about you?
Yeah, just jumping quickly kind of off what Jayreece just said, like student voices really just need to be heard, like to the people who are banning the books. Like for us, like being exposed to different ideas and topics, just I don't know, essential for students to develop and navigate through their own ideas, like growing up in life. So I feel like if a student wants to be able to read a book, but they're kind of like not being included in the process of that book being taken out of classrooms and things like that, they're less likely to be able to speak out and have those conversations in their classrooms and their schools. And then that kind of censors and limits how much these topics are just going to be discussed. So the primary thing for that is just student voices just need to be heard. To the students, if you want to read a book in class and it's banned, there's plenty of other ways that you could kind of get to read that. It sucks that you can't read it in schools, but keep trying to get that knowledge and get educated and read up on different things, because especially in the world we live in, just knowing and having that knowledge is just great.
And Dáminí.
So my advice to students would probably be, you can find a book wherever you want, even if it's banned in your schools. Find it in the libraries, find it elsewhere. Because when they first banned the books, one of the things that they wrote was hide the books in an undisclosed location. Find it anywhere else. It is not contraband. Find the books that you want to read wherever you can, because knowledge is power. And through knowledge, we can change the world and change our perspectives. To the people who are banning the books, I think it's very important to consult the students before any of these decisions are made. And by consultation, not just having people in the room and not listening to them and just having them there as placeholders, but actually taking what we have to say as youth into account and then making the decisions. Because without that, you're never going to be able to have well-rounded, responsible young people who are going to be the change makers of tomorrow.
Thank you. You guys, that was so great. Now, I was given extensive instructions on how to take questions and I've forgotten them. So I'm going to do the thing where I lean in unattractively to try and read Q&A. You know, you have to like lean in really close. So I hate this section. But we have a lot of questions. So I'm going to start with this one, and this is for Jayreece. So how would you educate teachers so that they can deal successfully with books like The Hate U Give?
Oh, that yeah, I think in a sense, it kind of has to do with
I think this is because you sort of said that you think the teachers just aren't being given training that makes them feel comfortable. So I think they were just asking you, like, do you think it's possible? So should teachers have more conversations about race in university? Should there maybe be training around how to have these conversations? I think that's what they were asking. So I don't know if that's that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think even if like there was like a PD day, maybe just like having maybe like, I don't like, not sensitivity training, but like kind of like, you know, just like have some teachers that are really well known for it, like being able to mediate conversations, kind of like learning from like their different like peers and stuff amongst the teachers, and seeing like tips they have, as well as just learning as well as like the school board, kind of different school boards kind of working to kind of have like a certain like training established, even that like maybe like just English teachers go through, that they can actually have these conversations, because your literature can be really powerful. So even outside of this, it would just make sense to kind of have maybe even like a PD day, or just have like a certain amount of PD days, like over a certain period of time, where they can just kind of, you know, talk to the different English teachers and see like, oh yeah, this is how I do it with like this is how I kind of go about talking about this situation or this book with my class, and this is how and my students kind of reacted in this way. Because one thing I would say is that like students, I'd say that a lot of students, like say with like Dáminí, they can really see, and they really kind of like give their like input back to the teachers in a sense, probably. So they can kind of take that and be like, okay, well, I did good in that area. So like maybe I can kind of, maybe, you know, help teach, or maybe, you know, do something in that manner.
Yeah. So also
I hope that kind of answered it.
No, and you're also suggesting that maybe having students do some of the
Yeah.
PD days and talk to teachers about what's important would be helpful. I've got instructions now. I'm not supposed to be reading the questions. Ange is supposed to read the questions. So go ahead, Ange.
Okay, yeah, you can just ask me when you're ready for another question, each
Yeah.
question.
Okay.
Yeah, the first question that I've got for you is from Raj. And Raj says, I would like to ask each of the panelists how they feel when they see growing demands from parents' rights groups that students should not be allowed to read books that are about racism or books that portray LGBTQ families in favorable ways.
So I don't know who wants to start with that. Micaiah, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, sure, I'll jump in. I think for me, it's just like kind of like the parents and like those groups, they're still kind of having that sort of past thinking of those topics being more kind of taboo and not talked about like in schools and like in communities. But as we move on in the world and as we progress, kind of more people need to be educated, and these topics and things and situations they're becoming more prevalent. So for me, I think that more things, more books, and just more thoughts need to be shared and heard. Because if we're not talking about it, then things aren't getting done about these situations. So the more voices that are heard from other people and the more ways that we can get to have conversations about it, the better it is for everyone.
And Dáminí, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I really think that it's important to have different perspectives, and I don't know. Could you repeat the question maybe one more time? Because
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Most of these. Oh wait, sorry. I would like to ask each of the panelists how they feel when they see growing demands from parents' rights groups that students should not be allowed to read books that are about racism or books that portray LGBTQ families in favorable ways.
Yeah, so different perspectives for sure, because if we only read books that are about what these parent groups sometimes want, we're never going to be able to make decisions for ourselves. So it's really important that we take the time to understand people's perspectives through books. And that's one of the fastest ways to learn things, through reading. So I really think in order to create change in the future, we need to be able to read books that we want to read, because in the future, these people who run these parents groups aren't going to be the ones who are going to have to take charge and run this world and live our lives. We are going to live our lives, not these.
And how about you, Jayreece?
Yeah, I think to kind of answer that question, that I kind of have a question in response to that. It's kind of goes like, do those like groups really take into consideration the student's voice again? Because if like they had a conversation with students or just like their children about how they felt about the books and how they felt about different things, I feel like maybe there wouldn't be as much backlash, because then they may be like, okay, maybe my children can actually handle this. Maybe I'm just being overprotective, or I'm just trying to shelter them in a sense. So I think that's a result of having students absent from the conversation in a sense.
Thank you, Ange. Can we get another question? And thank you, Jayreece.
Yes. The next question, somebody's asking this, says the school community has been educating people about anti-Black racism for years, yet most people are having a hard time connecting with the humanity of Black people. And while this is happening, the school board is busy censoring books that could present Black realities to those who may never have the opportunity to learn about it. What do you think people have a hard time? Why do you think people have a hard time moving from anti-racist education to action? And how can people be supported to move beyond performative allyship?
Dáminí, you nodded, so I guess it's on.
Yes. Performative allyship. I do not like it. I do not like to see it. It really rubs me the wrong way, because it takes the humanity away from people, because then it's like, well, what can I do? What can me myself do to help these poor people? When it's not actually really about that. It's about the fight to walk alongside people to help get to that destination or goal, because people can read books all day and know all the terms and know all the right words to say, but when it comes to actually standing up for what's right or standing up for a person, will they actually be able to do it? So I think it really challenges the idea of whether you're willing to actually take action to help, rather than say what you want to do to help.
Micaiah?
Could you repeat the question, please?
It was quite long, but basically it was about people moving from like all the conversations about anti-Black racism, but then when you're actually dealing with racism, they're like pulling books from the classroom. So it was really about the performative allyship of saying we care about racism, but then falling short.
Yeah, I think that, in that case, something just needs to be done where, again, like these conversations need to be had. So when you're kind of backtracking and going against saying you're gonna help, but then you're like not really helping, you're not helping the conversations that could be had in like classrooms and the ideas and thoughts that could be shared around people in these classrooms. So it's not allowing students' voices to be heard, and for students' thoughts and ideas to get out.
Go ahead, Jayreece.
Yeah, I think I don't know, what kind of comes to my mind when I think about this is actions speak louder than words, but not just that. I think having the right intentions behind your actions. So yeah, that's just something that kind of came to my mind when I thought about that. So
Thank you. Ange, another question.
The next one is from Rhoda. Most of those demanding that books be pulled from school curriculum and school libraries seem to deny that students, especially in grades 7, 8, and high school, are as mature as they are. Do you have any ideas about how our schools could do to give students more of a role in these issues?
I don't know who wants to take that first. And so a lot of you have kind of talked about this, that the student voice should be heard. So do you have ideas on maybe how that could be, like students organizing? Should there be groups of students? Should there be an advisory council? Those kind
I'd like to give props to Jayreece Whiley. He created our school's Black Student Association, which I'm a co-chair on along with 2 other girls. And it was a really good idea. And it's really helping us to be able to form community and solidarity among Black people in school. Because through that club, we're able to come together and sit together at lunch and talk about some of these issues and create outlets for issues like this. So I really like to shout out Jayreece.
Well, Jayreece, you might as well.
Thank you, Dáminí. But yeah, one thing I say is, and I was on this actually last year with HRCE, is the Student Leader Advisory Council. Something like so having things such as that, where you actually go talk to like the higher ups in HRCE or the school board. And I actually had the opportunity to kind of speak to I think the top person in HRCE about some of the issues like going on with like kind of going on when it comes to Black students, and just like certain like our reality and certain things we go through as students, and also talk about the Black Student Association and just like, you know, stuff such as that. So I think using certain groups as that, like a Student Leader Advisory Council, where you can kind of, you know, have that maybe like a bridge or conversation, because I feel like once we start a conversation, a lot can come from that. And like when you talk to people, you learn from people. So I feel like when you learn better, you do better. So in that sense, you know, I feel like, yeah, conversation is definitely an integral part of this.
And Micaiah.
Yeah, I think creating the space for just more conversations to take place is like a good way to start. So I know many different schools that have like what's like a student affairs kind of committee, where they're kind of like the bridge between just like the head of like the school and like the students itself. So by being there to just bridge the gap to those like 2 kind of separate spaces, they're able to create more areas and opportunities for that conversations and situations to be had. And just for even in like schools, like kind of going back to like the books, like having different like book clubs and just like kind of what Dáminí has going on, just like being able to take books and just go through them and talk about them with like other students, and have the students kind of share their thoughts around how they feel about their book is also a great place to start.
These are all great. You guys are doing so good. This is so good. I'm all like beaming. I actually just bragged about you guys in a little text. I'm like, these students are so brilliant. Okay, next question, Ange.
Yeah, the next question is from Ayo. How do you balance the harm that can be caused and has been caused due to the inability of teachers to properly handle conversations around race and racism, versus the need to keep these books in the classrooms as a tool to help address the issue of race and racism? Are we willing to risk the possibility that Black students could be traumatized if this is handled improperly?
So did you all, can we hear that? Maybe read that through one more time, I think, just to make sure we have the question.
Sure. How do you balance the harm that can be caused due to the inability of teachers to properly handle conversations around race and racism, versus the need to keep these books in the classrooms as a tool to help address the issues of race and racism? Are we willing to risk the possibility that Black students could be traumatized if this is handled improperly?
Does anyone want to start with that?
I'll start off. I think when it comes actually, what was the question again? I kind of went blank.
The question is really that on the one hand, you guys are saying that these books are really important, but on the other hand, there are negative experiences discussing books. So To Kill a, people, I'm blanking on the name of the book, but when people are reading these books and they are experiencing harm. So I guess the question is, how do you balance the potential for trauma in these classroom discussions, the potential for racism, the potential for students to be uncomfortable with the need for students to be able to access reading material. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So is there a balance here? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the goal is that no students feel harm from like when these books are being read and discussed. And I think there's a responsibility to mitigate mitigate it the most that it can be. And I think that kind of goes back to maybe some sort of training around it. I do think that there is harm also if we do not talk about the books in a sense. And I feel like there's short term like harm and then there's long term. And I think like if there's a lot of people and like a lot of these books like get pulled out of schools and a lot of different phenomena happen and like what's kind of happening currently, I feel like we kind of there's a lot more people that are uneducated on these issues, and that can make these certain issues such as police brutality worse. So what we really need to do is we really need to mitigate the harm in the short term so that we can mitigate the harm in the long term. Because by just taking the books out of class, you're mitigating it totally in the short term, but in the long term, it gets worse, I'd say. Because now you have students and you don't have students anymore. You have people in society that are working in society, such maybe as police officers and different people of power and different people that hold different positions that aren't educated on certain issues and that can really affect the portion of the population, specifically Black people. So yeah.
How about you, Micaiah?
Yeah, I think to start, like teachers need to be educated. There needs to be a way that we can get more teachers to know, be comfortable, and be able to share and talk about like these books in class. A thing that would start with that is by getting more books that kind of ease the way that teachers are able to directly converse and have these books in classes. Like, for example, you said the book like To Kill a Mockingbird. That book's kind of more, you could say, for just from the opinion of like a Black student, like it's less for Black empowerment. I'd say it's more like white people, kind of like the white savior kind of trope, like good white people versus bad white people. Whereas like The Hate You Give is more kind of like Black people being empowered and taking a stand against what they believe. So I think books that are able to kind of reach that topic of empowerment, like touch like Black students, it would create more of like a safer space for Black students to be able to have these conversations in the schools.
So you're also identifying a difference between perhaps books written by Black authors and books written about Black people by other authors as well. Yeah. How about you, Dáminí?
Yeah, I've definitely had both sides of the coin. I've had like a teacher in grade 9 show us Hotel Rwanda without giving us a disclaimer or anything like that, and just playing it, and it had a negative impact on me. And I could say yes, I felt traumatized because as an African, I was like very overwhelmed by everything. So at times I had to leave. But then on the other hand, in English class, our teacher showed a video of like police brutality that was reported, which was also still traumatizing. But the difference was there was a disclaimer and there was a discussion after about what went on, which also sometimes in the showing of those videos, it's also really odd because it's people that were watching. It's also maybe shouldn't be shown to students, but giving disclaimers is really important, and also giving teachers adequate training to be able to address these topics or to be able to talk about these topics in classes. And maybe even at times having a Black student support worker in the room to be able to provide support if needed, if students either have reactions or they talk about that they might not feel comfortable sharing.
Thank you. And another question, please.
Yeah, the next question, somebody asked, is the problem regarding the hate you give as an example of being canceled? Sorry, I'm trying to piece it together. Is the problem that schools and school boards are choosing one book for the whole class? Are there not better literature strategies like literature circles or individual reading projects? What do you all think of this?
So do we always need to read the same book as a class, or could people choose among sets of books what suits them, for example?
I feel like
Yeah.
that work for some people at times, but then there's also a feeling of collectiveness, Ubuntu, that you have when you read a book with your class and get to engage in a discussion and like banter back and forth with people when they have views and maybe you do agree with or you don't agree with. So I think it's important to have that collectiveness in the moment when you're reading, especially in
Both of you also. So Micaiah and then Jayreece.
Yeah, I think that when we all like have the same sort of book, we're able to kind of have like more of that open discussion more. Whereas if we all have like separate books with separate topics, even though that may be able to tailor to different students better, I feel like just the more the group discussion that we're able to get out of reading a same book together just aids in people having their ideas and opinions shared.
And how about you, Jayreece?
Yeah, I think when it comes to that question, that we like when it comes to like the notion that like actually, can you say the question again?
Basically, like, do you always all need to read the same book, or would it be possible for there to be different books being read in different ways at the same time?
Okay. Yeah, I think when like the both of them said, I think when there's a conversation, that there's more growth within that conversation. Like I can read a book, and I've read like certain books in class, and I just read it to kind of do the work. Like I just read it to say, okay, let me just get this answer out of the book, and let me just, finish this assignment. But that doesn't really leave room for growth, especially if you're reading it by yourself. Like, because when you're not really challenging yourself. But if I'm reading it and I'm reading the book, and somebody beside me is reading the book, and we're having a discussion about the book, they may be like, well, I think about it this way, and I think about it this way. And then you're like, okay, I can see why you think about it that way. So that maybe my perception changes because of how of their viewpoint or point of view. So I think it's less effective, and I think that's why it's used very commonly in classrooms, because there is a certain effectiveness to it, and there's like a certain when you're reading the same book, it really does it kind of lets you grasp it, and it lets you see it from multiple viewpoints and see it in a different light as well.
I have a quick question, and this is for the boys, the men. I guess, I was also curious about the experience. My impression is that girls read more than boys often. So particularly for Black guys reading, do you think that this kind of book has been important? Like, are Black men responding to these kind of books in particular ways as well, as opposed to some of the other books that we read? I don't know if you can speak for everybody, but just talking to your friends and stuff.
Like writing poetry, one thing, like it's kind of weird. I struggle when it comes to reading books, when it kind of comes to getting into books. And usually I'm just like, it's very hard for me to actually get into a book. And like, I don't like reading that much. I'm not a big reader. I'm not. And one thing that really kind of surprised me about this book was that I could sit there and read it for hours. Like there's just so many times where I was just like, okay, I'm gonna probably read like 10, like 20 pages, 25, and I would end up reading like 50, like 60. So it's just like getting lost in it. And I feel it's because you can kind of relate to it if it's like the different characters, the different like the settings, like the setting of the book, the community. And it's just like kind of coming from a Black community, kind of like seeing it's like, oh yeah, I can kind of see that, and just relating to the book and different parts of the book. Yeah, I would definitely say yes. Yeah.
And go ahead, Micaiah.
Yeah, like for me, I just felt like the book was just so personable. Like I was just able to dig into it, like Jayreece said, just like read all of it, just because I just felt so immersed in how I was able to like relate with the main character, and I was the way I could relate with her situation and the setting of the book. But I think for kind of going to what you said about guys, like for me and my friends, whenever it's like a book that comes across where it's kind of, I wouldn't say like more controversial, or just like a deeper thought to it. Like it's not just like a book where it's just a book. It's like a book where I can like take it, think about it, and just like look back on it and discuss it, right? So I think that just gets more of us just talking, and a lot of my friends just like talking. So books that get us talking is just great. So yeah.
Thank you. All right, go ahead, Ange. Next question.
Yeah, the next question is from Danielle, and it was directed towards Dáminí. Who should do the selecting of the books for classrooms and school libraries? Danielle is asking.
I think students should definitely be consulted. And I think they should have maybe not the final decision, but they should definitely have a big part of that selection in terms of maybe class to class, writing down maybe 10 books they want in their library or 10 books they want to see in their class. And then that being sent to the office, but not just sent there, actually used and taken into consideration and actually ordered and brought to the school where they can access it. I think it's really important that students take charge of that because it's their education and their future.
Thank you. Next question.
Yeah, the next one is from Alana. And Alana asks, says, in Ontario, we're relying more on a list of Indigenous texts vetted by Indigenous elders. Is it not time for a national voice on school texts with consultation from communities underrepresented in the school canon?
So I don't know if you guys have thoughts on that. Like, so rather than maybe province to province or even school to school, like, do you think there should be a national reading list so communities, elders, students all working together to choose materials? So rather than maybe it just coming from a department of education, how do you guys think about that? Micaiah, you made the mistake of nodding, so you get to take on this difficult question first.
Yeah, for
You can't
sure.
move if you don't answer the question. You gotta freeze.
Just being able to have more people in on that conversation is always a great thing. Like just the more voices that are able to be heard from students, teachers, communities, different provinces alike, like it aids in having those opinions shared and ideas shared. So when it's like more open like that compared to more of a restricted like department, whereas only like a few just group of people just making a decision, it kind of opens up the world just for people to share how they feel, and especially it's so important coming from like communities and elders, especially like the importance of their experiences and their life experiences. Obviously they may differ from like the experiences of people who are making our decisions for us now, so having more ideas from everyone, especially on a national level from different communities, is really important.
I don't know if either of the rest of you, anything else to add? Jayreece or Dáminí?
Yeah, I think when it comes to like I think the more people that are in the conversation, I think the better the outcome in a sense. I think there's a lot of wisdom, especially with like elders. I never even thought about that because there's so much point of views, and like kind of like what I said earlier, like when you have those conversations with like more people and you have conversations kind of like such as this, like there's more that you learn, and there's a lot of benefits to it, and I feel like students could really benefit from having more people select books, like a bigger group of people made up of different subsets of people such as elders and people of that manner.
And how about you, Dáminí?
Yeah, definitely. I think when that question was said, it really put like an idea into my head of having like youth on school boards, helping impact the books that are chosen, and having them there meet every single time whenever there needs to be a consultation, or even just attending meetings to be able to impact their school and their environment. And I think it's even important even just to have textbooks improved and edited and changed, to have more information and to have more present issues mentioned. And even in like math textbooks, even in the way that they're worded and things like that, it tends to be very Eurocentric. And sometimes it doesn't often appeal to the amount of people or the different diverse people who are going to have to read those textbooks and do those questions. So I think it's definitely important to have consultation of other people when making decisions.
We've also talked a lot about teachers, but librarians as well, right? So, and that would be a great opportunity in public libraries as well as school libraries for librarians to maybe work with groups of students in the schools and talk about student reading lists and stuff. So I know we're co-sponsored by librarians, so that's an idea that these young people are giving you too, to maybe have more places for young people to have input in library decisions as well. Andrew, you have time for maybe like a couple more questions?
Okay. The next question is from Laura, and Laura asks, how would you three want teachers to handle or treat the N-word when it comes up in class texts?
That's a good question. I don't know who wants to take that first. Because this has been the big controversy, right? Like Huckleberry Finn, the N-word. That was a big controversy a few years ago. So what do you think is the right way to deal with this word? Is it having a conversation about it? Just saying the N-word and like not saying the actual word? You've mentioned some discussions around that. So what did you think is the best way? Dáminí, you had some earlier thoughts on that. So I'll start with you.
Definitely giving disclaimers, talking about the history of the word, talking about who can say it and who can't, and just about the impact that the word has when it is said, because a lot of people don't understand. They just think it's a word. It's not just a word. It has history behind it, it has trauma, and it has emotion behind it. It's not a word that should just be thrown around in classrooms. You can't say it.
How about you, Jayreece?
Yeah, I think yeah, Dáminí kind of summed it up pretty well. Yeah, one thing with the disclaimers, like I like speaking from like being like in school in like Nova Scotia. I know like we have African Nova Scotian support workers, so just even having them talk about it and having them kind of touch on the significance if possible, when before like as a kind of like a disclaimer and kind of going into the history, so that like say if there was a video that was playing, then maybe a lot of students, I mean the majority of students wouldn't look at the only 2 Black students in the class. They'd be like, okay, yeah, this is okay, I know what I'm doing. So I feel like just educating as much as you can in that situation is best.
And how about you, Micaiah?
Yeah, kind of like what everybody said, like giving a disclaimer first is important because there's history behind the word, how it was used in the past and how it's used even today. But the main thing is to educate. So teachers should be able to have that kind of discussion to the class and kind of explain why this word is wrong, why it shouldn't be used, why people shouldn't be saying it. And kind of like what Jayreece said, a great idea is to bring in that support worker for a school and just having another voice, not only with the teacher, because there's many different resources teachers can use. So having that strong resource as the African Nova Scotian support worker to come in and just talk about to the students, and that person is in a position of authority, so they see that person who is in that position and explaining and educating to you. It just opens up your ideas in your mind more.
You and Ange, I guess maybe last question.
Yeah, this would be a good one to finish on. Does your student, so this is from Tony, and Tony asked of all of you, does your student experience encourage or discourage possible interest in pursuing a career as a teacher or a librarian in K-12 or post-secondary education?
I don't know if you guys want to talk about that. Would you ever consider teaching or perhaps being involved in education in another way? I don't know who wants to start. Jayreece, I guess, but you're in business.
Actually, one of my dreams, I would say, is to probably become a professor at some point. So, so being a professor is one of my goals. So but like also aside from that, like kind of working with like just like the school board to get like the kind of like what Dáminí said earlier, the Black Student Association in every school. So then that Black students can feel supported, they can kind of come together, unify, and just have a voice that can really be heard, because there's power in numbers. So I feel that's something that I'm really trying to really get done and just kind of give back to when it comes to just helping out the students after me and just making my experience, or me making their experience better than mine in a sense. So yeah.
How about you, Dáminí?
Yeah, I definitely think our experiences are important, and that in the future there will be more Black teachers, hopefully, that will be able to inspire kids to see themselves being successful. Because even in my school currently, our only Black teacher is our Black student support worker. In the whole school, it's only him. I've never had a Black teacher, ever. I'm not sure if I ever will, unless if something happens next year and suddenly he's a Black teacher. But there is something really special about having a Black teacher, and being able to see yourself in that person and see them like teach and see them be able to just be in the space that you are also in and have to navigate. Okay, so I really hope that more people continue to be educators. I don't hope to be a teacher. I hope to be a journalist, and through journalism, I hope to.
And how about you, Micaiah?
Yeah. For me, I've had like plenty different experiences, but I know for sure, like one of the only times in my life where I've had kind of like that Black kind of main role model in my school that wasn't my support worker was actually back in middle school. My principal was Black, and having that was just so important for me, just because seeing that person in that spot of leadership just motivated me to do better, to lead better, to just converse and just be a leader throughout my school. So I'm not planning on being a teacher per se, but what all of this has just motivated me to do is just make the path for the people who are coming behind me just a better path, and just making their experiences better than mine.
And you guys, I saw Miss Karen Hudson in the chat earlier in the participants. So shout out to a legendary African Nova Scotian principal. Shout out to you, Miss Hudson. Thank you for showing up as always and supporting students. I left us a little bit of time because I was hoping that our poets might drop something quick on us in the last couple of minutes. You know, I like to do this to y'all, but if you don't have anything prepared, don't have to. But if you guys have anything ready, we'd love to hear it.
Would you give us like 2 seconds to find something?
Yes, I'll give you 2 seconds to find something. And while we do that, I'm going to do the thank yous. So thank you so much to the Center for Free Expression for the tech support, the pre-meetings. Ange has done so much organizing, Jim as well, Penn Canada, and I've forgotten the name of the libraries, but the library support here too. This has been such a great event to hear from young people. So thank you everybody for making this event happen. And I hope people continue to share it around. I think you've seen how brilliant our students are, how much they have to contribute, not just in terms of their own experiences, but real policy change and real thoughts on how we can really shape the reading and teaching of books for young people. So I encourage people to share this around to teachers, to librarians, to schools, and really get this discussion going as well, because I'm just really proud of everybody for coming and speaking out and taking such an active role leading on this issue. So Thank you, everybody, and thank you to the attendees. And if you guys are ready, whichever one of you is ready first. You guys good?
I'm ready.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So this poem is called Mirrors, Reflections, and Representation, and it's just about how a lot of times, sometimes we're forgotten in consultations, and we're forgotten when it comes to decision making. As an example, like how these books were taken out of schools without first consulting the main people in the book. So here it is. Our melanated brown skin, elevating defiantly despite the odds, despite the attempts to block and segregate spaces, we thrive. We survive in spaces that don't reflect us. We continue to defy the flawed portrayal of our communities and society. We reject subliminal messages that say we don't belong, changing the course of history by writing ourselves in. We challenge all these narratives, and yet we feel uneasy in spaces where we are the only. And some have the privilege of not having to look around the room reflexively and knowing that there are less than two that look like you. Imagine people on the cover of magazines, Black people making eyes glitter like marbles when instead it should just be normal, a standard sight. Ordinary and beautiful. To acknowledge and think of privilege is to be aware and thoughtful of what you take for granted and others can't. We live in a country we like to call a mosaic. Yet we are all fighting to remember the patterns and parts that indicate us. Truly, at times, we feel unseen. It's like the spotlight shines bright, but we still manage to be the shadows in between. We fight to break down archaic spaces where representation is not yet present, where public servants make decisions that don't reflect all the people they serve. For too long, our presence has been confined between the lines, yet beyond our hidden footprints are left behind. In different realms depicting our stories, we run the risk of believing a single story. Not only would that be untrue, but also incomplete. There must be attention to the way inclusivity and diversity are thought through. So we are no longer just bodies filling spaces for community consultations, but rather factored into equations with introspections taken into consideration. The call for representation grows stronger every day. We yearn to depict our stories, read our stories, know our stories. For narrations must reshape the world. In uncharted waters, our presence is sown. Our melanated brown skin elevating defiantly despite the odds, despite attempts to block and segregate spaces, we thrive. We survive in spaces that don't reflect us. We continue to defy the flawed portrayal of our communities and society. We reject subliminal messages that say we don't belong, changing the course of history by writing ourselves in. Thank you.
Thank you, Dáminí. And Jayreece, if you're ready.
Yeah, I'm just I wrote this for Black Excellence Day actually, so yeah, it's just one of the first ones that I actually seen. So Black excellence, I'm trying to walk it out, figure it all out, realizing I'm beside it, standing on giants. This whole time, the generation great, we gonna be the change. One day we gonna lead the change. Look to the ones who led empires great, to the ones that follow the change, to the ones leading present day. Setting the stage, one can set the stage for great change. One person can make a change, great change. So many doing great, can't list the names. Gratitude fills my heart when I think of Black excellence. The young, gifted, precious, just like Black skin tones, precious. Never forget we excellent. If you start questioning, it came from kings and queens, so don't you dare question it. Part of our history not taught that scholars even acknowledge. Dropping knowledge, no scholar, let it not be forgotten. Up to you to deposit it in your mind and act on it. Let the freedom of all, not just Black people, leading when injustice is seen. Communities, we building up. There's no question mark on that statement. We coming up, fight after fight made us tough. Pursuing excellence can be rough. They didn't do it for us. To this day, we opening doors. Education is key. So I'm glad there are people leading in that course. Truly Black excellence, they are. We should know no more cliche quotes. Let the truth be out. We are Black excellence, where my hope lies. Only war is the one against right. One can fight for change on the wrong side, so be aware. Black excellence trying to walk it out. Figure it all out, realizing I'm beside it, standing on giants. This whole time, the generation great, we gonna be the change. One day we gonna lead the change. Great change, never back down from what's in our way. Fighting for our communities, where we were placed to die, we thrived. Guess they were surprised when the body bags were needed in the springtime. Black excellence at its prime. Doctors, lawyers, physicians, electricians, entrepreneurs, mathematicians, economists, scientists, teachers, leaders, administrators, artists, Black excellence in my eyes, Black excellence, I'm trying to walk it out. Figure it all out, realizing I'm beside it. No time for silence, why I'm writing. Fire ignited, carrying the torch of pride in my mind. I can't be silent when I'm tired. I look to them for energy, the ones I stand on. So yeah, I walk in this world with my chin up, shoulders back, because the foundation which I stand will never lack. Standing on giants my whole life. Viola Desmond, Violet King, Rosemary Brown, Jean Augustine, Michelle Jean, many names. While I'm even going in this day, so I could do for the ones after me what they did for me. That's Black excellence. Passing the torch, that's Black excellence. Teaching and supporting, that's Black excellence. Let this stand as tribute to the people pursuing Black excellence.
Micaiah, Jayreece, Dáminí, you guys represented us all so well in this province, and I'm just so proud of you all. You were so great. I'm going to bring Jim back for some final remarks, but everybody just give it up to these 3 amazing, brilliant students. Thank you so much. And Jim, take us out.
I couldn't agree more. The 3 of you were just fantastic. We're going to be posting a video of this conversation on our website tomorrow. And so I want to thank the audience for being here too. And please, if you found this valuable, as I certainly did, encourage people to go onto our website and look at the video. It's cfe.torontomu.ca. So it'll be up there tomorrow. And we're also going to post some resources that our panelists are going to suggest for those of you who'd like to read more about this. Maybe we can persuade our panelists to post the poems they just read as well. So I want to thank both the panel and Al, you're a marvelous moderator. The next panel is going to be on Wednesday, November 29th. So that's 3 weeks minus a day from today at 7 p.m. It's going to be an evening panel. And it's going to carry on some of these issues. The title of it is School Libraries and Curriculum Under Attack, Why and What to Do. And we have Anita Brooks Kirkland, who's the chair of Canadian School Libraries, which is one of the co-sponsors today. It's the organization, it's the national organization of school library associations from across Canada. And Tammy Lee, who's president of the British Columbia Teacher Librarians Association. We also have James Saunders, who's a book publisher and a distributor of books for schools, and Graham Shantz, who's the assistant director of the Waterloo Region District School Board. So they're going to be looking at some of the issues that you've been talking about as well today. So if any of you in the audience would like to continue this discussion, I'd encourage you to tune in on November 29th. It's a Wednesday at 7 p.m. And the information is on the CFE website about upcoming programs as well as our past ones. So it's cfe.torontomu.ca. Thank you all so much for being with us today. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.